Hey everybody, welcome to another Kicking It with CoMo. I'm Drew with CoMo Comic Books, and happy Friday, y'all. It's been a week around here, just lots going on, and you know, you probably noticed I didn't get a V out last week. Don't have one for you tomorrow, so I'm like, we got to do something for the community. We got to get out here. Let's do a little live stream. So I'm happy to have everybody here this evening. So we're gonna kind of let some people hop in, starting to get some people in, and we'll just kind of hang out and see what goes on here for a minute. Got a few topics to cover tonight, as the title alludes to. I've made a decision. I'm going to be changing some things moving forward, and con season is getting ready to kick off for us. So I thought it's a good time to talk about some Comic Con best practices or tips, and get that out, share with everybody, maybe get some feedback going, and just help each other maybe have a better, more enjoyable con season here in 2023. Because there's a lot of new people that have come into the hobby since the pandemic hit. Obviously, when that happened, we didn't go to cons for a little while, so some of us may be a little out of practice. I know. I think it was August of 2021 or whatever. The first real show I got back to last year was a little more normal, but I know that's not everybody's experience. So hopefully 2023 now, everybody's comfortable to a spot where, we're going to be getting back out there, in and amongst each other, digging through long boxes, elbow to elbow, and having a good time, kind of getting back to normal a little bit. So let's pop over to the chat, see who we've got hanging out. See my buddy Tom, MSG Comics. We're going to talk more about him a little bit later. Thanks for being here, Tom. Desired Comics, how's it going? Thanks for joining in this evening. Daily Grand, good to see you. Thanks for coming by. Flexipotamus, also in the chat. Good to see everybody. Valerie, how's it going? As far as I am today, it's Friday, so I'm pretty stoked. Just live that 9-to-5 life with a couple different side hustles, so there's always something going on. Peekeel, how's it going? As of right now, I don't have any plans to go to Dallas. I've got a pretty busy front half of the year. Fan Expo is one I need to get to at some point. I've got some friends who always set up down there, and even if it's just from like a fan perspective, Fan Expo is a show I'd love to get down to, but it's kind of tough as far as like vending goes, just because it's a good haul to Dallas from here. Generally, I try to keep within about a 5-hour radius of where I'm at here, and I can hit a lot of pretty decent sized cities just here in the flyover in that 5, and sometimes I'll stretch it out to like 5.5, maybe 6 if I really want to go somewhere. But Dallas is definitely beyond that. William, how's it going? What is up with you? Glad you're here as well. We've got Captain of Comics made a live stream. We're happy to have you. I agree. TGIF, that's what it's all about. At a foundry. All right. Well, thanks for hopping on the stream wherever you are. So let's go ahead and get down to business. Let's talk about the itinerary for the evening. Glad to see everybody here. We still got people jumping on, so we'll just kind of set some expectations for the stream here this evening. I'm old-fashioned. I've got a nice little pad with all the things I want to talk about. So the first couple things are what the title of the video is. I am going to be changing my business practices. I'm going back to CGC after years of supporting CBCS. We'll get into that, the reasons why I made that decision. I'm not completely cutting off CBCS by any means, but I just think that at the present point, it's time change things back up and re-embrace CGC at this point. And then Comic Con season, like I talked about earlier in the intro, we're going to talk about 5 tips, best practices, just things I've learned over the years that I think will help you have a better convention experience. And these are applicable to whether it's like comic shows or swap meets, just anywhere that you're in a spot where you know you're going to be on your feet on that comic book grind for a full day, a couple of days, what have you. After that, I want to talk about something that a member of the community's got going on right now, something that's pretty cool. Just want to continue to raise awareness about that. I want to talk about a couple of recent, well, specifically one recent piece of comic book original art that sold. Some discussion in the community about that, and it's one of my absolute favorite books. So anytime you get to talk about some classic original pre-code horror art, I'm going to take the opportunity to do that. And then last but not least, I'm going to give you a little update about what I've got going on as far as like conventions, some things we're trying on the channel, just that kind of stuff. So nothing too crazy, no heavy lifts. If you didn't catch it last night, I was on with Swaggle Hoss. We did a live stream last night on his channel talking about some recent thefts that have come to the attention of the community and talking comic book security, just things you can do to keep your collection safe. If you did not get a chance to see that, hop over to his channel at some point this weekend and check that out. It was a pretty good conversation. Vancouver Comic Junkie was there too, so we had a couple different points of view with that conversation. But just high points before I hop into that. Take care of your stuff. Comic book thefts are not a new thing, but with the way the economy is going, just the way the world is right now, coupled with the increased values and the greater exposure, just those values are getting out there. They're a target at this point. So do what you can to protect yourself and secure your collections, because nobody wants to come home and find the situation that the guy we talked about last night did, where he had, I've seen an estimate of upwards of $70,000 in comics stolen in a home break-in. Just that would be awful. So it's time. I've made a decision. We have to address something. We've got to talk about the age-old conversation. Is it CGC? CGC? Oops, I did that backwards. Is it CGC or is it CBCS? And at this point, I got to go with the CGC. And not just because this book is an 8.5 and the other one's an 8. It's been an interesting couple of years as far as third-party grading goes, period, right? We've had all the craziness of them just getting swamped during the pandemic. Everybody was buying all sorts of stuff, having anything that wasn't nailed down slabbed, and they just got buried. Turn times went to crap, and basically you just sent your books to whoever you thought might be able to get them back to you sooner, or at least that's the way it seemed for me at one point in time. But I'd made a decision several years ago to really kind of lean in and choose to support CBCS. At that time, I thought they had a fairly comparable product to CGC. Boric starting the company, I really trusted Steve and just his background with being a founding member of CGC, going off to do his own thing. I get why that ruffled feathers, but all of that aside, he's still one of the best graders in the hobby, period. One of the most knowledgeable guys about comics I've ever met. So that was good enough for me to not be afraid of CBCS. Met some other guys, but the main reason that CBCS appealed to me is that around the same time I made the decision to go with them, CGC was changing their own business model or their own practices, at least in my area. When I really started getting back into comics in, the late aughts and the early teens when I started going to some of the bigger regional comic conventions, which I mean, I'll just show my hands here. Mainly that is um, Planet Comic Con in Kansas City. It's a good size show. There are tens of thousands of people that attend this show every year. At that time, CGC and CBCS, once they came onto the scene, would both show up to this show. They'd have a booth and you could direct submit at shows. So at that point, it was just whatever I wanted to go with. Most of my initial submissions were to CGC because, CBCS wasn't a thing yet. And then as time went on, CBCS got to where they were even attending some smaller shows. And the main advantage for me, in my view back then, despite having memberships where I could direct submit books, was that when they came to these shows that I was already going to be at, I could submit my books there. I could give them my books at the show, know they were going to be protected, and I'd save shipping and a potential risk exposure in my mind of shipping a standalone package off to the grading companies, where it was my responsibility until it got to them. I just viewed that as a way to limit the overall risk, save a few bucks on the shipping, and it was just what, for whatever reason, seemed to be the best way to approach it in my mind. Fast forward to a few years later, CGC starts changing their business models. Now they're only going to big shows like MegaCon, C2E2, ECCC, NYCC, Baltimore, just all these major shows that are nowhere near me, shows I'm not going to attend. While at the same time, CBCS was, as I mentioned, still attending these same shows locally and even coming in a smaller scale to some smaller one-day shows in the area. So I still had access to that direct submission in person. So that just naturally swayed me to CBCS at that point in time. My chain of thought was just, I'm going to support the company that'll actually still come out to my area and support the community here where we're at. For better or worse, no big deal. Also, the pricing when CBCS first came on was, they were always just a little bit cheaper than CGC, as I recall. So that was an appealing thing. And turn times back in the day were comparable. It wasn't that big of a deal before really the onslaught of 2020, 2021. Both companies were turning things fairly quickly, and it wasn't that huge of a deal. Last reason I kind of chose to stick with CBCS as long as I did, I really like their new holder. I thought it was a great case. CGC at the time had some major issues with the Franken slab. If you don't remember that, it's when they updated to the new outer well that we still have. But when that first iteration came out, there was no longer an inner well. They were basically taking the books and pressing them in between a couple of sheets of Mylar inside the inner well. And that's where we started seeing books that were getting damaged. They'd start waving and rippling up. Newton rings became really bad at that point in time. And it was not really something I was interested in spending the kind of money that you have to spend when you have books graded, and getting back a product that was, potentially going to harm my book, potentially going to degrade visually or aesthetically over time as that pressure manipulated the book in different ways. And then also Newton rings. Everybody hates Newton rings. So that's kind of the reasons why I went with CBCS at that point in time. Flash forward to now, CGC's corrected the holder issues. We have the inner well back. That's great. I still like their outer well. I think it looks really good. It's very, very clear. I've never been one to be hung up on the labels. I know CBCS's labels bother some people. And I still really like their holder. I have no beef with their holder at all. But really what was the final nail in the coffin of why I had to make this change And I know this is something that has been talked about some other places. I think we even referenced it last night, and I'll just go ahead and bring it up. This is what happened. That really was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, as the old saying goes. There were 2 copies of Incredible Hulk #1 that sold in Heritage's signature auction that took place in early January. Both of these books sold on January 12th, as you can see up here. Sold for on January 12th, 2023. They were 2 consecutive lots. This 7.5 CBCS white page copy, and it's a nice copy. I mean, as you look at it here, it's presents really well. You got some spine stresses there that break color, small crease there, but I mean, practically no marvel chipping, which is unheard of for this book, especially in just 1962 Marvels in general. But it's a fantastic color strike. It's just a gorgeous book. So you would expect that book would perform well when contrasted to the following lot, which was a CGC 7.0, also with white pages. Naturally, books are practically identical, except for this one being a half a grade higher. And the unspeakable happened. The CBCS book sold first. So usually what happens in this kind of a deal is you'll have people that battle out for the first one, and that one will go for higher, and then you kind of have the consolation prize on the second or the following lot, and usually that book underperforms. This threw us kind of for a loop. I mean, there's always been the argument that CBCS books underperform in an auction setting. I've heard that a lot, and I think there's enough evidence to support that in an auction setting. Now, selling like I do, where you're fixed price, if I have a CBCS book, I'm going to put it out at the CGC price. That's just generally how it is. I have very little problem most of the time at conventions selling CBCS slabs for the same as I do CGC slabs. Auction crowds and in-person Comic Con or comic show crowds are very different. So what happened is this book, the 7.5, sold for $58,800. Definitely not chump change. But the next auction, the next lot after that, the 7.0 CGC book, that's a half a grade lower, remember, from the 7.5 CBCS we've just been talking about, sold for $63,000. So it sold for $4,200 more than a book that was graded higher. And it was just unbelievable. And you look at this book, and to my eye, the grade's right. Like, I clearly think the 7.5 is better based on the front cover scans that we've got here. There's enough little tears and just the beginning of chipping along the top edge. Of course, similar creasing and color breaks on the right side of the spine. You've got the beginning of some marvel chipping there. I think they got the grades right. So I mean, it's as close of a comparison as you could possibly have of these two books. And again, white pages here on the CGC, and the lower grade book. I can't find the right word to describe it, but I mean, blew the higher grade book out of the water. Yeah, it's less than 10% of the overall sales price, but who in their right mind pays more for a lower grade book? That was just mind blowing to me. And there were some of us that were watching these auctions live as they were going, and it was just, we all kind of picked our jaws up off the floor because it wasn't expected by any means. And when that happened, that was just kind of the point where I had to stop and I had to look at it. I had to accept the fact that, there is truth to that. And me doing what I do, as a comic dealer on the side, I've got to remove every obstacle I can that comes between me and selling a comic book to a customer. And if it's going to be a complicating factor that I have CBCS books, I need to go to CGC. That's just all there is to it. And like I said, I sell them for the same price point, but I have no way to measure would I sold this book one show sooner, two shows sooner. So it's just, I don't know. It is what it is. So we're going to make a change there. But that's not the only reason I decided to make the change. As the pandemic wore on, both companies got buried. Of course, BlackRock bought CGC, so they have this massive influx of resources, financial backing. They hired a bunch of people. CGC started to dig out. CBCS has improved. Don't get me wrong, they have improved. But I mean, I'm still seeing stories within the last few weeks of people who are getting books back that have been at CBCS for a year. And that's just crazy. That blows my mind. And I get that if they had books pressed by in-house pressers there at CBCS, that's an additional queue that can take some significant amount of time. So I get it. But now CGC is just knocking it out of the park. They're rocking and rolling. It's back like the old days where once a book gets checked in, you're on the way. Things are progressing very steadily there, and I think that's a good sign. And there is still some lag in CBCS, and we'll look at that here in a second. To kind of go along with that, CBCS has increased their prices for a second time. This came out this last week, and I'll be honest with you, looking at this, it's convoluted at best, in my opinion. We now have 3 tiers. So we'll call it the vintage option. We'll just call it an option. And within that option, we have 3 tiers. We have the standard tier, we have a priority tier, and we have the express tier, which, I've long been told by my dad this saying that, speed costs money. How fast do you want to go? And I think this is the greatest representation of that that I've seen in the hobby in a while. Standard, and I'm looking at vintage because I'm not like some folks that just slab everything. If I slab a book, it's because the slabbed value of the book is significant enough to offset the difference between the time and money I'm going to invest in having that book graded. So if I've got to dump $130 and having a book graded, and I can sell it raw for less than $130 less than the slab price, I'm just going to sell that book raw. I'm going to get my money back faster. I don't have to wait in. I don't have to cut into my margin on that book by dumping more money into it, if that makes sense. Now, the more this goes up, obviously the faster you go. But the other element of that is, with the way the market has been, if you're waiting 60 plus days on books to get graded, you might have missed the boat. I mean, how many people sent in books during the pandemic that were flashes in the pan? They got super hot, values went way up. So they just pumped all these books into the grading companies. And by the time they came back, it was over. You had nice slabbed books that are worth a fraction of, what they were months ago. And maybe FMV at this point is, at the same or maybe even less of what you could have just sold them at raw prior to that. So that's another consideration. It's just the continuous price increases. And I get that CBCS held the line for a long time. And, they said they weren't going to raise prices during the pandemic and all that. Clearly we're out of that because we've now raised prices twice. But just for some balance here, here's what CGC's pricing looks like. And I'm not going to lie to you, CGC is a lot more expensive than what it used to be as well. We're looking at express tier. So books valued up to $3,000. You're going to spend $130 to submit a book in that tier. Excuse me. So you're going to spend 130 bucks, but you're going to have that book processed through in 5 days. So let's hop back over to CBCS and just look something comparable. So they go up to 4,000 in this tier. They charge you 100 bucks, but they're going to take 3 times as long. And I get 15 days isn't a whole lot of time, but also remember that's 15 business days. So business days on the CGC side, where it's 5 business days, that's 1 week, barring holidays or conventions or something. That's a single week. That's not much. You get into 15 days, you increase your likelihood you're going to bump up against a convention or a holiday or something that's going to expand that out beyond just 3 weeks in all likelihood. Especially, you get to certain times of the year where it seems like every other week there's a holiday. It's just another thing you gotta worry about. Now, one area I will give them some props on this new pricing. If you have extremely valuable books and you do want to send them to CBCS, the premium tier here, which is the equivalent to CGC's walkthrough, 5-day turnaround, 200 bucks flat rate, that could ultimately save you some money, whereas CGC on the walkthrough does 3% of FMV, right? Again, they're still going to beat the turn times. They're at 3 days. But on the flip side of that, as we just discussed, you would potentially be costing yourself profit on the back end if that book underperforms at an auction, which, let's be honest, that's how a lot of the highest end books do get sold. So you got to do some math and try and figure out where you think your book will actually sell at to figure out if you think that would potentially be the way to go. And then ultimately, the last kind of reason I could come up with for why I would leave CBCS and go back to CGC is one of the things that had kept me with CBCS is I had completely lost faith in CCS, which is CGC's Pressing company. I had sent some books to them in 2020, 2021, something like that. Waited the time, paid the extra money, basically double the grading cost to have these books pressed. And when I got the books back, they didn't look like anything had been done to them. I didn't press them myself because I didn't want to run the risk on some of the higher end books. But I know I would have produced better results than what I saw from CCS. And then I've subsequently learned that it sounds like all they do is like cold pressing. I don't know all the details, so I'm not going to speculate too much on that. But it's like, they don't do a full, thorough pressing job. It's just more kind of a quick, fast, and dirty press. So that's one of the reasons why I stuck with CBCS. Their in-house pressing has done some good work for me in the past, and I chose to support them. But the turnaround time for pressing is astronomical as well. And then you get queued in the longer turn times for grading. And it was too much of a time suck. So fortunately, there's a local guy in Kansas City who is a bit of a pressing wizard. And I'm basically in line to get hooked up with him and have him do some work for me. We've had some conversations and we chat from time to time, and finding that third-party presser removed the other reason why I was sticking with CBCS. So now CGC, here I come. I did submit a couple of books to CGC at C2E2 last year. It's that 0.5 Avengers 1 that you've seen me show on I think I did it on a live or something, and then also on my Instagram. And then I had an Avengers 8, that first Kang graded as well. Another low grade book, but I had a really good experience with that at C2E2. And again, it was an opportunity where I could go to their booth at the show, fill out the paperwork, hand them my books, and walk away, and just feel like I knew they were going to get there okay. So that's how I landed back at CGC. I'm looking forward to getting some more books graded. I've got some really nice modern stuff I've been sitting on for a while. I've got I could easily put myself in the poorhouse right now with a single order to CGC, but I'm going to slow play that a little bit. But I am hoping to get some stuff there sooner rather than later. But what are your all's thoughts on the classic debate, CGC versus CBCS? Drop some thoughts there in the chat, or if you're watching this on the replay, post a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on those big two. But for now, let's hop back into the chat, see what's going on, see who I've missed. Gron says that CBCS still has the better slab. I do really like that case. That's just all there is to it. Peter popped in. Thanks for coming by, sir. Glad to see you. Lee says that CBCS turnaround times are horrible. I would agree with that. Looks like he's got some books that are going to be having some birthdays here. Oh, let's see. Almost an 8.0. It's an 8.5. Where's that? Yeah, and this guy actually hasn't been pressed. Let's get rid of that. This guy has not been pressed. I got it before I knew what that was. Come on, you can focus. But it's a nice book. That's actually one of the books I want to have sent off to my my guy. I think I saw MSG drop his name in there, Embassy Collection. So if he's on Instagram, does some good work, posts some results on there. So I've got that 8.5 181. I want to see what he can do, if he thinks it can be improved. The notes say it has a chance, basically. And then I've got ASM 129 that's an 8.0. It's a really good candidate. It's got some non-color breaking creases on one corner where somebody dropped the book that could definitely be pressed out and improve that. Maybe get up into the 9s. All right. Valerie says, Andrew. Okay, yeah, he's talking to Andrew. Says that the CBCS book is almost a little bit higher if it didn't have that. I don't know what we're talking about here. That's one of the joys of catching up with the chat, is you often can lose the context of what's coming in. Gary in the Frozen wants to know what my favorite comic book storyline to read is. I'd probably have to go with Kraven's Last Hunt, Daredevil Born Again, something like that. Alan Moore Swamp Thing's really good. I could rattle off several things probably. Comic Books Galore says that his books have been at CGC for over a year now without any pressing. I'd be curious to know what tier that is. Were they modern stuff that was kind of slow tracked, or just like economy tier, something along those lines? Let me know. All right, Grand. What do you got? 5 books at CBCS that took 50 weeks last year. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Geekstock says he did not feel that CBCS got a good press on his books. And I think that's just, it's inevitable that at some point, when they do enough, that there's going to be books that get through that, nobody loves their books more than the person who owns them. So, we maybe always think there's a little bit more that could have been done. But I think that's the true advantage of having that third-party presser, where you can get out there and, that's what they do. And they have the time because they're controlling their workload. They're not, under the um, the pressure of all the work that's piling up in front of them, they can say yes, they can say no as far as taking on new jobs, and they're able to give the book the attention that it needs so that they can maximize each book, not just maximize the volume of books they're turning through. Obviously, there are going to be people out there that are just turning and burning because they just, the more they do, the more they make. But if you get out there, people with good word of mouth, you can find the guys that are in there and they're doing it right, and they're doing everything they can within reason to make sure that the book is as well taken care of as it can be. Let's see, I've been debating about that. Signed up for CGC. Yeah, it's kind of basically all you can do is really just pick your poison. Neither of them are perfect by any means. They all have their opportunities. They all have their strengths. And it's just, you kind of have to hope that when you submit books that you're not the person who gets the whammies. You got to hope that, as bad as it may sound, that somebody else is the one, whose books disappear or get destroyed or what have you. And it's always, anytime you let the book out of your possession, you're taking on some risk there. OA Comics said that when they found out CBCS was shipping books to people's houses for grading, yeah, that story didn't play well. That was actually kind of a boon to CGC, because they'd been embroiled in so many just different poop storms around that time, and then that came out, and that was pretty egregious. So that kind of got some of the heat off of CGC when that happened. So, like I said, neither of them are perfect. They've all made their share of mistakes. Steve, let's see. Steve says he gets more money from CGC slabs, but the grading is the same. Holding off on slabbing books, and many are the cost of the slab. Yeah, it's definitely a buyer's market right now. And the slabs are not bringing an X factor as much. And that's an interesting really thing to discuss, because is it the slabs aren't bringing as much, or are buyers FOMOing into a level of comfort where they're now willing to pay almost the slab price for raw copies? So, which side of the coin is it? Are the slabs underperforming, or are the raws overperforming, courtesy of our friend FOMO? I think that's interesting. I don't know how we quantify that, or calculate what the actual truth is there, but I don't think that's something anybody can deny. I've heard plenty of conversation over the last couple of years about people noticing the narrowing of the gulf between raw prices and graded prices. And I think a lot of that may be brought on by the prevalence of CPR at this point, right? Like, people are also more willing to take on some of the risks themselves if they are doing pressing and cleaning, that they think they can buy this book that is currently a 6.5 and maybe improve it, or what have you. And that's great as long as you're investing the money in those books and you're able to get the grade bumps to make it all worthwhile. But if you're not, that can be tough. I mean, especially if you're doing that routinely or with some books of value and you're missing grades. If you're buying books that you think are 6.5s and you're doing your stuff to them and they're coming back 5.5s or even 6.0s, depending on the book, you can be in a pretty big hole at that point. So just interesting thoughts there. MSG says he's sending books to CGC if they're for resale, if they're for his PC and he just wants to preserve them. That either is fine. And that's, I mean, Tom, hell, you were you're there most of the time. Like when I send my PC stuff in, or at least the last I did, it was to CBCS, and there is some level of that that's just, that's my my gift to Mrs. CoMo is that, if I drop dead, you don't have to argue with somebody over what grade this Hulk 181 is, or what have you, or my ASM 14, something like that. Scrolling, catch up with some chat here. Spiderweb wants to know if the values are the same yet. I think we're actually moving the opposite direction at this point. Unfortunately. Let's see. Valerie wants to know about signing up for the $25 tier. I don't think there's a cap on. You'd have to double check the membership details, but I don't believe there's a cap. As long as once you secure direct submission capability, which any of the paid tiers affords you, I believe you can submit as much as you want. Now, if you get into, I think it's the top tier gets 10% off on grading fees. That actually used to be, I think, 15, and then the middle tier got 10% off, if I remember right. Because I've pretty steadily been in that middle tier over the years. So there's been some changes in there. It's not quite as generous as it used to be. That said, I do have an affiliate link, so it's out there in the description of most of my videos. So if you want to sign up for a CGC membership, click on that link. Yeah, I get a little grading kickback. They send me some credit to my account when I submit things. So check that out if you want to help support the channel and CoMo in general. All right. Comic Books Galore says there were Modern Magazine or Treasury size comics. Oh. Do Treasury size, they don't have a holder that big, do they? Economy, which at the time was 6 months. Yeah, that's the thing. You send your books in when the turn times say one thing, and then by the time they get there and they get checked in, that is no longer reality. Right, Dino's talking about Casey Kahn back in the mid 80s. That'd be like the old Mo Can show. Heard lots of good things about that show over the years. Kind of wish I was around to see it, because I mean, it's just like, it's I just picture a smoke-filled room, just a lot of people having some good old-fashioned comic book fun. Here's an interesting question. I have no idea how to pronounce your name, but thank you for the question. I want to know if I feel like the grading system has ruined collecting comics. It's had an impact. It's changed. Obviously, it's changed the hobby, because basically what you're doing now is you're taking comic books and you're turning them into a commodity, right? It's a bearer bond or some sort of a asset. It's not just a collectible at this point. And I think there's been good things that have happened. Like CGC came about for a reason. It wasn't just somebody sat down one day and was like, let's just take our comics and make it to where we can never read them again. We'll just put a number on them and it'll be great. It came about because people were starting to buy books on the internet. So if we're going to blame anybody, let's blame the internet. That seems to be popular. But basically, you were buying books on eBay and they were being misrepresented, and you never really knew what you were going to buy. So you were gambling big time, and especially with like Golden Age books. I did an interview with Steve Borick last May, and, he obviously was kind of leading edge in all of this back in the late 90s, I think, when the conversations really started. And then the CGC was founded in 2020, I believe, something like that. But it was just, these guys that were primarily Golden Age collectors were buying books, and, you'd have missing pages, or one of the original eBay ways of screwing over your buyers was to take one of the famous first editions, which were like treasury sized exact reprints of East or of DC mega keys. So we're talking Detective 27, Action One, so on and so forth. But if you they had a cover that said, famous first edition, was obviously ornate and had a smaller inset cover of what the book was. But if you tore that outer cover off, it was identical to the original, except for the size. But when you're taking pictures and posting them in a listing on the internet, you have no frame of reference. So that's part of the reason why you started seeing pictures of comics be uploaded to eBay listings that had rulers in them or other objects, so you could get size perspective. So it was basically the seller's way of assuring you that, you're not going to get screwed here if you buy your Action One from my listing and I'm going to send you a famous first edition. So I don't know. I can argue both ways. It's had benefits. So, just the certification aspect of it where you know what you're getting, right? I mean, especially they've done a really good job over the years, for the most part, of maintaining a high level of quality in the guys they let in the grading room. So yes, we've all seen books that were overgraded, undergraded. It's an art. It's not a science, right? It's still, even though there's 3 people involved and it's the average of their opinions, somebody can have a bad day. Somebody can be having stuff going on at home, or they're distracted thinking about this or whatnot, that can sway their opinion. Or they could just be tired of seeing Ultimate Fallout 4 for the 87th time that day and be like, you know what, screw this book. It's not as good as the other 86 I've looked at. Just anything like that can impact the grade. So it's, like I said, pros and cons. Scrolling through, see what else we've got. All right, the dice must flow. How's it going? Glad you made it. Peak Eel talking about Dallas Comic Con in the mid 80s, like the Wild West. Well, I mean, that's fitting being in Dallas, All right. An early CGC scandal was micro trimming. Okay. I mean, here's the thing. Deception has been in collectibles for as long as there's been collectibles. As long as people are involved, eventually somebody who will be involved that can find an angle or some manner in which to take advantage of the situation, right? I've heard of stories that you could take an old 62 or 64 count, whatever they are, Crayola set and some cheesecloth and do some of the best nearly undetectable color touch you can possibly imagine on some Silver Age Marvel books. That was an old school trick. Micro trimming is a thing. Just people loosening staples to tuck the little tab of the cover that's still remaining underneath and then tightening the staple back up to reattach covers that have popped. And there was a time where pressing was considered a really deceitful or frowned upon practice. And it's just the hobby has evolved. And there's been times where, and we've definitely seen the standards of like restoration and conservation shift over the years as well. And, I think that's just a healthy practice. It's something that honestly we're gonna have to get used to at some point. And I know I said this last night, but this is cheaply, quickly, and poorly produced paper that was never intended to last for eternity. When it just, these things were disposable when they were made. Nobody gave a crap. They were for kids. Time is not a kind force on things. I don't know about you guys, but I'm staring 40 down, and I miss bringing out of bed like I did at 16, it was pretty great, you know. Now I wake up and it sounds like somebody's walking around behind me with a fresh bowl of Rice Krispies. This is snapping, that's popping, this is cracking, and it's just rough. And some of these damn comics are, you know, twice as old as I am, and you know, they've been stuck in basements and comics and or basements and attics and garages and God knows where for decades. There's going to come a point where if some of these books are going to exist, they're going to have to be conserved. They're going to have to be restored. And that's something you see in the rare book market. I'm not an expert in that, but from what I understand, they're not as offended by a professionally or a professionally restored book, just for the simple fact that, you know, these things weren't meant to last forever, and you've got to do what you can to protect them. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolution of opinion continues to evolve. And especially, we're already in an environment where there's a lot of books out there for the standard collector to ever have a shot at. They're going to be looking at conserve. They're going to be looking at restored copies. I mean, hell, like a Batman #1, I don't think you can even touch that restored for under $40K, something like that. It's in any kind of shape, even restored. It's, you know, it's the price of an automobile or a house at best. So I digress. Do some more scrolling, catch back up. Super Mole Retro. I am in Columbia. Haven't been to Warrenton in a few years. Used to go there back in high school for some jazz band competitions. I played bass, so used to hang out at the college there. Oh, hey, Greg. Okay, that makes sense now. How's it going, man? Flexipotamus wants to know if we can talk about custom labels. If anyone is pro custom label, you probably don't want to talk to me about that. Just for the simple fact, and there's this, we talked about it last night over on this guy's channel. How's it going, Swag? Thanks for coming by. There's a new custom label for that Selling Superman movie that's going to be coming out. And it looks like a 5-year-old's art project. It's just got this over here, that over there. It's terrible looking. If you go to CGC's website, well, actually here, guess what? I just happen to be at CGC's website. So let me pull that up. We'll get this guy back on the screen. Yeah, they're calling it the Fantastic Collection. And, you know, just prepare yourselves for this shit show of a label. Look at that. You got a film reel. You got Fantastic. Then over here, underneath the shiny thing, you've got Selling Superman the film, but it's kind of the film kind of tucks under that and it blocks it, and you've got like a portal into the negative zone or something behind all this crap. It's gross. I don't know why that's a thing. But for me, I mean, this is a couple $100,000 book in a regular label. Who's going to pay top dollar for that label? For me, this is, if in some alternative universe where I have stupid money and would be the guy to buy this book, one, I'd hope I could pay under the last sale of the most recent 8.0 because it didn't have the disgrace of this label on it, but it's an instant reholder. You know, send it back, notate on the damn label that it's from this Selling Superman or Fantastic collection, whatever it is, and give me a regular label. That thing is horrid. I mean, look at the back. It's got this logo on the back. You got this guy peeling his shirt open. You got some glasses, like in a little caricature of an Iron Man 1 and an Avengers 57. Who wants that crap on an 8.0 Batman 1? Seriously. But anyway, okay, I'm gonna stop complaining about that. But in general, I don't care for the custom labels, just for the simple fact that, and I realize it's the argument that CBCS has used for years. I care more about the book than the label. If I have an FF49 and I think that art's badass, a little bitty tiny version of it stuck up on the label is not going to do any more for me than looking 8 inches down on the below that on the actual freaking book where it's bigger and hopefully in brighter colors and awesome looking. So I don't see the benefit of it. And I get some people enjoy it, and that's cool. Like we always say, collect what you want, how you want, spend your money on what you want. If that's your thing, do it. It's awesome. I think the only one I really thought didn't completely stink was the Hobgoblin one. But that's just me and my Goblin and Ramita bias. All right. Heading back to the chat. Lots of love up in here. Otme says the fact that we protect and encapsulate these books should give them a long lifespan, maybe decades or more. Yes and no. The slabs are not airtight. If you store them poorly, they will break down. You can have books that significantly degrade or deteriorate in a slab, especially if you're leaving them in a high moisture area. Don't forget, these things are not UV proof, so you can 100% fade the crap out of a book, which will knock the grade. So slabbing is not the end all be all as far as protecting collectible paper. All right. MSG wants to know if they made it a pedigree. From what I've read, I don't believe it's a pedigree. I don't think it qualifies for that because a lot of these were bought on the secondary market. The buyer wasn't buying all of the books directly off the stand, as I recall. So that's why they just say it's from the collection of or what have you. And yes, that thing is real. Unfortunately. Anybody from LA up in here? I know somebody in the chat is here, but they're also trolling, asking if we should go to PGX. And I will say, grade your books if you want to grade your books. And that's probably one of the more common questions that I get. Emails, messages, comments, whatever. Should I grade my book? And the answer to that is it's up to you. Grade your books if you want to. If you want to go deeper than that, it generally is, why do you want to grade it? Are you grading it to protect it? Are you grading it to preserve it? Are you grading it to resell it? Whatever your path is, obviously, could influence the suggestion of which way you should go. But in general, I would recommend one of the bigger two. I would stay away from a PGX. And I realize that they have made some improvements. Long gone are the hopefully the days where there was zero restoration check and you could just pop the case open because it was only held together by like 4 little studs in the corners, and they would say a book was a first print, was actually a second print. Just any of the horror stories you've heard about them over the years. But if you are somebody who just wants to have a book slabbed for the aesthetic of having a slab book, or you just want protection for your books, they're pretty cheap and pretty fast. I have a buddy who had some. He was a seller on Whatnot. Not a big comic book seller, mostly a toy guy, but when you do one, you kind of wind up with some of the other. And he had some good results out of, as far as like the resale side of some PGX slabs, and he was able to turn and burn them pretty quick because they got back to him super fast, and they weren't very expensive. So Yeah, this is a great tip right here, everybody. Something I do a lot. I most of my stuff is kept in the dark, which is a good way to help this. But if you do have your books stored in a room that is exposed to, like, has curtain, or a room that doesn't have blinds or curtains that are shut on the regular, definitely follow this tip. Slide a backing board in the front of your boxes. I've got a really nice, really nice What If #1, Volume 1, #1. It's probably a 9.2 copy, except for the fact that the handle of the box is burnt into the cover of it. So it's just right in the middle of the book. There's this very obvious handle fade on it, which is a bummer. So that's a great tip. If you remember anything from this stream tonight, remember that. Omni says they've had some stuff graded with EGS. So they were harsh on the grading. I felt that way about some grades I've gotten from grading companies before too. EGS slabs have finally kind of started filtering into the market around here. I saw one last year in person for the first time at a show out in Kansas. And, the thing I really like about them, and I know the guy who owns it or runs it pops in from time to time. And I don't think he was happy with some of the comments I made. But the thing I think that is really the most valuable for EGS is just the customability of it, or customization aspect of it, where if your main goal with having your book slabbed is the aesthetics of it, you want something to put on your wall or on your shelf that's going to look badass, and to be able to tweak it and get that on brand for you, or your favorite color, or just to match the book, whatever. Being able to dial in the aesthetics of it, I think, is a really cool thing. I don't know how they're grading. I don't know. We have enough information to really kind of compare their grading as far as certification aspects, like how tight their grading is, if it lines up with the other two. I think it's a little early to see that, but you guys know how it is. Somebody out there is going to buy a bunch of EGS books, and they're going to do the crack and submit and see what they come back to all the different companies. I'm surprised at this point that video doesn't already exist, but it's not going to be me, because I hate that. I hate submitting books just in general. So even for science, I don't think I would do that, but it could be fun. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. And I think it's interesting. We were kind of talking about, are slabs underperforming, or are buyers just more comfortable with overpaying for raws due to FOMO, or because they think they can press books up and maybe come out ahead in the long run. So we definitely already talked about that a little bit. So it's something that we have seen and probably going to continue to see. Oh, let's see. All the way. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're getting value out of the stream, and just content in general, because ultimately, this is what I do. I sit around and I talk about comics. So if I can do that in a way that helps other people or entertains people or what have you, that's what I keep doing. Swag wants to know my thoughts on CPR. I haven't really done a lot of it. I've got a couple books that I have right now that's what I want to do. I've got like a GS X1, Giant Size X-Men 1, that's a CBCS 5.5. And I know the guy I got it from, he didn't know what pressing and cleaning was when he had it slabbed, which, I mean, at that time I didn't either. but it's a dirty 5.5 that's unpressed. I mean, I think with a good clean and a good press, it could possibly get 6.5, 7.0 easy enough. And, right now that's a decent jump, but, you get mutants starting to pop into the NCU and that book comes to life again. A couple of half-point bumps. That's some good money. I talked about an ASM 129 I've got earlier. That's actually out of a consignment collection that I bought a lot of stuff that's in my PC from. I already had a 129 at the time, so I didn't buy this one, but it was dropped, and it was originally like a 92, 94, and somebody dropped it at some point between when it sold from the LCS and the owner had it graded, and so it came back in 8.0, but it's got some crunch on the lower right corner that did not break the color. Thankfully, that yellow is pretty resilient, so hoping I can get a bump on that. But I know if you're Swag, I know you're familiar with Bry's Comics, but if anybody in the chat is not familiar with Bry's Comics, Bry does that on the regular, and he's had really good results on it with it for the most part. And I think some of that is just CPR philosophy in general, is just not being willing to give up on a book. Sometimes it's like we talked about, any given day a grader can have a bad day, and if you just stay with it, if you believe in a book, you're like, no, I think this is this, you keep sending it back, a lot of times you can will it into existence. So it's CPR is definitely a major factor, I think, in the market right now, especially there used to be a handful of pressers that anybody ever knew about, and now everybody and their uncle has a press and is doing their own or knows somebody who does it. It's a lot more competitive market out there, so maybe that's part of the reason why we see the raws overperforming in comparison to the slab prices, just because people think they can catch that bump, make a little money. See what Tom says here. Yeah, I need to get a copy of this guide, which, if you're not familiar, Matt Nelson, who's the CGC CEO, president, whatever he is, top dog right now at CGC, published a grading guide for CGC's grading standards, which the Overstreet grading guide was kind of the if the price guide was the Bible, this was the Apocrypha over the years that told you kind of the inside dirt on how to get the right prices. It taught you how to grade. It's a really handy tool. They've had several versions of it over the years, but it's a book I've always enjoyed. But I need to get a copy of Matt's book. And if you're not familiar with Matt, he used to own what is now CCS. It was a private company that he owned. And they were the best restoration and pressing and restoration removal company on the planet, which is why CGC bought them out. But he definitely he ran CCS when they first brought it over to CGC. Then he became a grader. I think he spent some time as a head grader, and now he's running it. So he's got the chops, I would say, to be qualified to write such a thing. And I agree, Swag. It's like, the effort there, you have to be able to capitalize on all that effort and expenditure. So yeah, I don't think CPR is something somebody would do on the regular for their PC necessarily. Maybe if they, on like an individual basis, they have this book they want to upgrade, they have that book they want to upgrade. Maybe that would be something they would pursue, but hard to say. And everybody's different, right? So let's we're an hour and 10 in, man, and I haven't even got to the second topic yet. Me rambling on about things like comic books. Imagine that. So conventions, they're back. We can get out there. We can shop for comics. We can go to the cosplay section. You can see all the crafters and Artist Alley and all the stuff that's out there. But going to a convention isn't something you can just kind of stumble into and expect to have a good time. There are shows that are maybe a little more forgiving, but if you stroll into a large Comic-Con or a large multi-day comic show, you need to have a couple of things worked out. You need to have some best practices, and it can be overwhelming. I remember the first time I went to a comic convention. It's a lot bigger of a show now than it was then, but I was out of my depth. It was nuts. And for some reason, I thought I could run a booth at the first ever comic convention I attended. And it was just me running around with stars in my eyes for the whole weekend. Eventually, as time went on, I got less bewildered by the spectacle of it all. I kind of knew what to expect. I knew what needed to be done, but there's still lessons you learn along the way. You meet other people that can give you ideas that maybe you didn't think of, or best practices, things they've had success with. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to share kind of my top 5 general tips to help you have a good Comic-Con experience. Whether that's buying collectibles, seeing the sites, what have you. These things are going to help you have the best experience possible. And the first thing, and this is really more for going on the purchasing side as far as collectibles, tangible items that are for sale at the show. Not so much the celebrity side of it. I'm not much of an expert on that. I spend most of my time on the sales floor, but the top thing you can do when you're on the sales floor, you're out at the comic show to buy stuff, you got to have cash. Cash is absolutely king. That said, most every dealer in today's world, whether it's the crafters or the comic guys or the pop guys or the toy guys, whoever's booth you walk up to, 99.9% of these people can run a credit card if you need to. And if, paying full price is your thing, you'll be fine, most likely, with a credit card or a debit card. No big deal. But if you're coming into the show with expectations of negotiating, with working out some deals, paying anything less than the marked price, if you roll in with cash, that is going to be the number one thing you can do to help facilitate that. So, second to that, what I would say is don't come to a show and expect to be able to get cash. You need to come with it in hand, because shows do tend to have ATMs on site, but at the bigger shows, they run out of money. And if they still have money in it, when you get to it, you are going to pay the most ungodly service fees you can imagine to pull $200 out of this ATM. You're going to pay 10% probably, between 15 or 10, 8 to 10% probably in service fees at $200. I've seen service fees from $15, $17, $20. It's just nuts. So step one, you're going to a show, bring cash. I know it's probably on everybody's list of recommendations for attending a show, and it's for a reason. It's the best thing you can do. Next thing I would recommend before you go to a show, make sure whatever your want list is, if you have your collection archived in an application like CLZ or something like that, or if you're old school and you have your piece of paper or your spreadsheet, just make sure that's up to date before you roll into the show. It can be easy to kind of just get so into it as you're digging through long boxes, hitting all the different booths. You don't want to spend your time, money, and opportunity buying multiples of stuff you already have. So if you get there and everything's already up to date, you know what you're looking for, that can help you avoid the dreaded double purchase while you're at a show. So be sure that you've got everything entered into your system. That I use CLZ, so my favorite reference is that. Make sure you've got everything entered in, sync it to the cloud, make sure all the things that are synced to the cloud are downloaded to your phone or your tablet or whatever you're going to have with you. Just make sure you have the most up-to-date information about what you already have possible when you hit the sales floor. Next up, I think one of the most important things you can do to ensure your experience is good is to plan ahead. You need to know, what days, one, are you going to be at the show? And then you need to figure out who and what you want to see and compare those two. So if you've got guests that are going to be at a show all 3 days, say it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday show, rather, the people who are there all 3 days, hit them on Friday, because inevitably there's going to be a guest that's only there Saturday, Sunday, Saturday only, Sunday only, that you are going to want to hit. And if you wander around all day Friday and don't capitalize the availability of those people that are there for all 3 days, and Friday's generally, a little lower in attendance, especially early on, you can check a lot of those boxes and get some of those queue lines out of the way before the mad rush on Saturday. And part of this planning ahead is, in addition to that, is panels, and then also leave time for queue lines, because chances are the person you are going to want to see is going to be popular. Say, like, I know we've got Kevin Eastman and Chris Claremont coming to the show I'm going to be at next weekend. Those guys don't go to a show that they have a short line. That just doesn't happen. So you need to plan wait time in there. And if you go in and you give yourself a good plan and you break it up and just kind of set yourself up for success in that manner, you're going to remove a lot of stress from yourself as far as trying to figure out how you're going to cram all this stuff in when inevitably you get enamored with being at the show and time gets away from you. And the next thing you know, you're watching the clock rushing around like a mad person trying to get everything done. So get your panel schedule, get your guest schedule, figure out your schedule, and get that battle plan. Next thing, and it kind of goes on, it's kind of a sister tip here. Be prepared. Come to the show, have your backpack or your luggage cart with your half box in it. However you come into the show, have it stocked with the things you need. Bring snacks. If you need an energy bar and a bottle of water, anything like that can help get you through or help you react quickly. Especially if you're like diabetic or hypoglycemic, something like that, having things on you can be a major benefit, because anything you're going to go to do, food lines are going to be 10 to 20 minutes long. It's just, everything's going to be crowded. So anything, just basic stuff like that you can bring with you. Now, don't advertise it. Don't walk in like, I brought my drinks. I'm ready for the Comic-Con. Stick that bottle of water and stuff down in your bag, and don't make it obvious that you have it, because some places, generally when you sign on with a convention center like that, they have exclusive food rights, so they don't want you bringing stuff in. But as long as you're not egregious with it, you can usually get away with something like that, especially if you tell them, medically, I need to have this. Also with that, so backpack, stuff in the backpack that you're going to need for the weekend, whether that's, your tablet, if you use that, or if you carry an Overstreet, God love you. So those things get heavy after a while. Don't forget your feet. Wear good shoes, because standing in line all day, pounding the concrete all day, it takes a toll on you. So we're not all as young as we used to be. So be sure to plan ahead, be prepared, bring a couple pairs of shoes to alternate in throughout the weekend. And that's my old man tip of the day. Lastly, I'd say know your limits. And that, again, kind of ties back in the last couple things. Don't try and do too much in one day. Really take advantage of being able to schedule your days out or your time out. Because if you do try and cram too much into one day, one period of time, you can wind up having just an absolutely miserable experience, because as soon as one of those dominoes falls out of sync, the whole thing just kind of goes to pot. So really, just if you don't attend for a whole weekend, that's fine. If you think you can get it all done in one day, cool. But if you need to go an extra day or something like that, just give yourself the flexibility to enjoy the show. Don't try and overdo it, because then you'll just leave mad. And nobody wants to pay the prices that it costs to get into a comic convention these days and leave unfulfilled because they just flat ran out of time. So those are my top comic convention tips for 2023 right now. If you have any suggestions or tips that you think would also be beneficial, if you've got some convention or comic show experience, be sure to drop a comment down below, or if you're here live, let's talk about it in the chat, see what we can come up with. But most importantly, get out, hit up some conventions in your areas, especially the smaller shows. I think are really what the hobby was built on and are the most fun, in my opinion. Get out there, meet some of your local dealers and stuff, and really just, enjoy it. Because ultimately, this is all supposed to be fun. So with that said, let's check back in with the chat. All right. Tom, behave yourself. That is definitely one thing I noticed. I'm signed up for a couple of different conventions this year here in the Midwest, and man, the voice actors are so prevalent. It's like a good chunk of the guests. I would venture like 40 to 50% minimum of the guests to most of the sizable conventions in the Midwest are all voice actors. I don't know if it's this. I don't feel like the coasts are that bad. I feel like the coasts do a lot better job of getting some of the bigger comic talent, just because, most of them are on the coast, so that makes it easier. Bottom tier collector says they view cons as a way to get their books autographed. Books aren't ever priced to move at cons. It's true. And you're too introverted to negotiate. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Negotiation is key, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, really. As expensive as shows are, most dealers can't really afford to underprice books, just because they've got to have as much meat on the bone as possible to offset some of those costs. I know, like this show I've got next weekend in Kansas City is a 3-day show, and between hotel, booth space, parking, all that, I'm over $2,000 before I even hit the floor. So it's one of those things you've got to, you're at the show to make as much money as possible. And that's where, and I'm not one of these guys who marks stuff up 25 to 50% over F&V and then sits there and acts like it's a reasonable price, which is a lot of what we had been seeing up through the end of last year. Whereas now, with the prices coming down the way they have, I feel like there's kind of been a crack in the dam, or it's definitely, in some cases, it might have burst to where some of those prices are coming down and are a little more reasonable. But yeah, try negotiating. It's really the best way to get some better prices. Ooh, a hefty double buy. Well, hopefully you can join the Flipper squad there and get your money back out of that, or maybe even make a little. How was ECCC, by the way? It's I love Seattle. Like that weather just suits me. But it's always so early in the year. I don't know that I'll ever make it up there. Here's a fun question. The longest I've ever been in a line for somebody was Snyder and Capullo at C2E2 back before the pandemic. It's like peak of their Batman run. I think I spent 5 or 6 hours in that line. They'd cut it twice over the span of time I was in there. And the second time they cut it, I was the third person from the front of the line. They had a panel or something they had to go to, so I knew it was going to be a solid 45 minutes or an hour more. That broke my spirit a little bit. That was tough. 2 hours for Eastman, that's not terrible. I'm not going to lie. Like, Eastman's going to be at this show next week, and I'm going to start my Saturday morning over in his line and just pray to God that most of the Fast Pass people go someplace else to start the day so I can get back to my booth before the day is over. But love Eastman. Nice guy. And I mean, turtles are life. So it's only fitting that I go see him every time he's in town. A 30K attendee ham radio event. Wow. I didn't know that ham radios were popping like that. That's a lot of folks. I think this show in Kansas City usually in the 40 or 50,000 range over the course of the weekend. And I don't know, how legit those numbers are, if they count 3-day pass holders once or 3 days, or, I don't know how any of that crap works, but it's always something. Ozzy up in the house. Hey man, thanks for coming by. Happy Friday, sir. It's fun talking with you. I guess it's been a week or two now. Oh, I know a good one for this one. What creator had surprisingly didn't have a long wait or any at all? Stan Sakai was in Kansas City back before the lockdown, and it was 1 to 2 people deep at most any given point in the weekend, which Stan Sakai created Usagi Yojimbo. Nicest guy in the world, super generous with his time, and just great to his fans. So that was a bummer. Hey, Bobby. Yeah, man. It'll be a good time. Whatever's left of me will be there. It's Casey's getting a bit of a personality is built up around it, as far as the community. We've got Marcus from Circumstances, Casey guy, Tom from MSG Comics here in the chat. He is Casey area. We've got Steve Berkland from Burke Fam 54, I believe is the whole handle. Comics out a little further west, but it's always a good time to get out to some of those bigger regional conventions that pull in folks from the area and just get to see everybody, and that's really, it's really the one of the better parts of being in the community, producing content. All that is just, you have your direct group of friends that are local, the people that you go to shows with and hang out, and you're like inner circle within the hobby. But then you get plugged into this and you get what Mrs. CoMo calls my internet friends. So just other people in the hobby that are producing content, and even just everybody that we come into contact with through producing content, or posting pictures and reels on IG. So always look forward to opportunities to get to meet people in person, just to prove to Mrs. CoMo that my friends are real. Let's see here. What's your I don't understand the question. Not sure what you're asking there, Valerie. if you want to rephrase it. I'll see if I can figure out what you're wanting to know there. Ozzy says the best part of conventions for him, yeah, just everybody is, the community aspect surpasses the books. Faux show, which I don't know. I'm looking at the vendor list on this show, and I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody brings. Usually, there's like somebody I consider to be a big vendor at the show, and I'm not seeing that on the list this year. So I'm hoping that we can all show out, and I'd really love to pick up a nice Golden Age book or two. But I don't know. Somebody's gonna have to surprise me with something that is not usually in their inventory. Bottom tier says his area has a huge pop culture convention. Pop culture seems to be taking over. I mean, beware of the pop culture convention and Comic-Con clothing. That is a common thing. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. That's a conversation we've had. Swag and Ryan from Automatic Comics and I chat daily, hourly, sometimes it seems. And my gut feeling is that this year is going to be a box year, a bin year where people are going to be shopping more in the boxes as opposed to on the wall. But I don't know, the wall book prices keep coming down. Like I about fell over earlier today. Saw somebody post I Swag, I think it might have been you that sent it. It was I don't know, Comics Elite 11 or something like that was selling a Werewolf by Night 32 that was a 7.0 for under $1,000, which is a book that this time last year was $1,700, I think, FMV. So maybe it is time to buy some of these keys. I don't know. Seems like a reasonable position to take, but I will have more information in a week. Scrolling through the chat here. ECCC was a shadow of its former self. That's kind of how I felt about C2E2 in August, honestly. Like what I remember of C2E2, I went in like 2016 or 2017. What we experienced last year was not on par. I mean, and I don't know, that's a story I don't feel like I ever really got to tell, at least at any depth, because obviously everybody remembers the complete and teetotal shit show that came out of C2E2 last year with all the variants and stuff like that. It was quite the drama. But yeah, just I don't remember walking around the show floor on C2E2 the last time I was there, and there being not just an empty 10 by 10, but like an empty 10 by 20, 10 by 30. Hell, there was a whole island that half of it was empty, and certain places it just, there weren't as many dealers there as I remember. And, some of the dealers that were there, the prices were just nuts. Well, speak of the devil, Circumstances up in the chat. Was just talking about you, man. And I will take all the basketball praise from KU fans I can get. Hopefully your all's coach is doing better. I saw he was in the hospital, and that's all I know about basketball today. Yeah, if you're in the KC area later this summer, there's they just announced yesterday a new Spider-Man exhibit. I will be there 100%. It's been a few years since I've seen Shooter, but he always seems to have a good line. And, Chris Claremont's the same way, very generous with his time, chats with people a lot. And I tell you what, just if you're ever at a show in Steranko's there, just bring a damn lawn chair and sit there and listen to the man talk. He is the smallest person in the room, but the biggest personality. guaranteed. It's you pay whatever it costs for a signature, but you get a signature in a show. Yeah, this is what I'm all about. We have reservations at a very, very nice barbecue restaurant for next week that I am looking forward to. Oh, okay. Do I stay away from certain states for certain Comic Cons? Honestly, I've traveled for some shows, but for the most part, I just kind of consume what's here. I wouldn't say there's any shows that I avoid at this point. I don't think there's any sizable show that I've been to that I would actively discourage somebody from going to. Like I've been to Heroes before, absolutely love that. Like, if our local airport would get a direct flight to Charlotte, I would be the happiest person in the world and would be at Heroes every single year. I've been to C2E2 a couple times. It's okay. It's my beef with that is just, I'm out here in a small city and, I go to like KC and St. Louis, which are, moderate sized cities, but you get into the major metros like Chicago, just like I start feeling like a cheap ass because everything is stupid expensive. But honestly, since the pandemic, hotel prices even out here in the middle of nowhere are, you're pretty hard pressed to find a hotel room for under $200 a night. So really, that makes the 250 to 300 you're going to pay inside of a major metro not as bad, I guess, or maybe everything just sucks more in general. That's also a possibility. But I don't know. I think some of the legacy shows, the shows have been going on for years and years and years. The shows that are put on by major promoters, you're going to be fine with. Fan Expo may be in a little bit of an interesting spot right now just because they bought so many of the Wizard shows that have just historically underperformed and kind of been turds. Like I know they had a St. Louis show that had, I think the report I heard was 4 or 5 comic dealers on it. So naturally that show doesn't exist anymore. So I think they're still in the process of weeding out some of those lower performing markets. So that could be a consideration, but like Fan Expo Dallas is, it's a banger of a show. Especially if you're into like celebrities. They always have fantastic lineup, it seems like. But then you've got your megacons, your SDCCs. Baltimore is a show I really want to go to. I've always heard really good things about Baltimore Comic Con. I feel like NYCC, it's another Reed Pop show like C2E2 and ECCC. I feel like it's just something you need to go to see the spectacle. Obviously, New York City is always going to be crazy. It's always going to be pricey, but it's I feel like it's an experience as much as anything. Let's see here. Yes. Good God, yes. Not to be morbid, but Opni's asking about OG original owner collections, Silver Age, early bronze, waiting to be discovered. Sadly, as the boomers get to the point where they depart, there's going to be so much come to the market in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, and really, we're already in the middle of it. It's sad to say, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of it. And honestly, there's still Golden Age stuff that pops up from time to time that, made the transition from the greatest generation into the boomers has been held. But as entertainment has changed over the years and people's interests have changed, there's so many are so fewer people that, are interested in grandpa's comics, dad's comics, or whatever. But at the same time that the interest is waned, the public knowledge about how much these things are worth is increased. So you get a lot of people that inherit stuff. They're just like, I'm rich, shower me with money and take this stuff. I don't care. Which, it is what it is, unfortunately. But the really good ones, I mean, hell, like think about the Promise collection that just came out. I mean, that's golden age level. Obviously, I mean, how many issues of that were the highest graded? Anytime something like that pops up where you're going blow to blow with Edgar Church, that's which is the Mile High pedigree. That's something to talk about. But no, there's so much Silver Age stuff that's out there. Hell, even here in Columbia, back before Christmas, there was this massive Silver Age collection that came up. Original owner, I don't really know the whole story, but basically, the guy had been associated with this house since the early 60s, late 50s, and it got sold and was being cleaned out, and they allegedly found 22 metal footlockers full of Silver and Bronze Age comics. And I mean, some of them I've bought pieces of that collection from 3 different people. I've got a consignment from another part of it because it kind of got broken up amongst a bunch of people. And that's a 5-minute drive from my house. We just found this brand new original owner Silver Age collection. So they are out there and they are plentiful. Let's see here. Yeah, that was an interesting video. Marcus, have you ever met Stronko before? It's pretty awesome, man. Doing some scrolling, catching up with the chat. Ozzy says he wants to hit NYCC or Baltimore. Yeah, Terrificon is a smaller show, I believe. I think it's probably more comparable to like where I'm going to be next week. But man, it seems like a really good show. I wish it wasn't so far away, but I mean, Northeast is got the thing going on for it. You just got so many people up there in that little quadrant. So, you can drive for a few hours and you're pulling people from a lot of different states, a lot of different areas. And I think that helps a show like that a lot. If anybody's up in that New England area, keep an eye out for any Comic-Con appearances for Peter Laird, because I want you to let me know so I can get on a plane. Swag, I tried to get my buddies, including one of them in this chat, to consider SDCC one of these years. And I don't know, they were complaining about something about money or something like that. I don't remember what it was. But I would like to check out the SDCC someday just to say I saw it. It might kill me though, but it's definitely on the bucket list. Yeah, his line's usually long. Last time he was at Planet with me and my wife, he actually stayed at our hotel, and we went down to have dinner in the restaurant. He was the next table over. And I mean, it doesn't matter where the guy is. He's the center of attention. So that was pretty cool. Details, Tom, details. Okay, let's transition. I think we're caught up with the chat. Going on an hour and 45 up in here. Man, talking about heroes. Yeah, Heroes is great. I believe I tried to talk to you into going to Heroes at some time too, Swag. Of course, now Reggie's out there. I think at least half of Two Brothers Comics was there last year. Heroes is just, for all the things we talked about, like voice actors and celebrities and all that infringing on the good name of the Comic-Con, Heroes is, like, it's our saving grace. It is, I think, the closest thing to something not comics you'll find there is they have like some pop culture cars, like, not the Wienermobile, but like the Mystery Machine and the DeLorean will be there or some crap. That's not bad at all. I had a great time. So while he's here, next thing I want to talk about, if you don't know, good friend of the channel, Swaggle otherwise known as Mickey Finnegan, the writer, entertainment industry extraordinaire gentleman, has written a comic book called Sanity: Rise of the Occult. The Kickstarter went live earlier this week, and happy to report that within 24 hours it was funded. Very cool. We were kind of just watching throughout the day and happy to see that really, it took a lot of the pressure off of Swag of hitting the goal within that 24 hours. But I know the wheels are already churning, thinking about stretch goals and things like that. And just, what going above and beyond the initial cost. Because, remember, when people set these budgets, that's like the minimum amount of money they need to produce whatever it is that they're looking to put out. So right now, we're sitting about 133% of the goal, which is awesome. But what we've got, I guess I don't Kickstarter very much, so I have to learn a little bit. We got some different tiers. Basically, we've got 5 covers right now. There are some different tiers that are maxed out already, which is awesome to see. And once I figure out how to actually get to where I can show you the covers, I'll show you the covers. Not there. There we go. So this is the A cover. And I know Swag is on the press circuit right now, getting out, spreading the good word about this. It is a Lovecraftian noir tale. So you get, gangster vibes and monsters, which nothing wrong with that. But I think this is the first maybe second Kickstarter I've ever actually gotten behind. No, it's the first Kickstarter. I've done GoFundMe's before. That's what I've done. Here's one of the variant covers. Always got to have some tentacle action up in there. People love tentacle covers. This is limited to 250. Other variant. This is my personal favorite variant. Got some EC vibes up in here. And then this werewolf one's really good too, which that is limited to 50. But, wanted to get the word out, spread some support for that. Just let you know that that's out there. It is, as I understand from our conversations, a 6-part miniseries that Swag has completely written. And, just the further and further we get above the initial 10,000 gold, just gives him the ability to get jump started on the subsequent issues past number 1. So let me grab this. Drop the link in there if you want to go to the Kickstarter and check that out. There's the link for you. I think the minimum tier is $8. That gets you the A cover. Still some great options in there, but we all know Swaggle, great member of the community. All around good dude. Help him out. hop on the Kickstarter, give them a little love, and a little trailer here if you want to check that out. But you'll remember Reggie and Dave Bratton came out with a book recently. It's cool to see some of the members of the community here and on YouTube and Instagram actually start to make some waves in the actual industry and be able to participate in making their own comics and just being able to capitalize on that love for the medium and being able to participate in it. So there you go. Sanity, Rise of the Occult from our boy Swaggle Hoss. Check it out, and I hope you like it. All right. See what we got happening in the chat here. Scrolling. Here you go, Swag. We got some feedback from the community. It's time to break out the whiteboard, it sounds like. Yeah, I agree, Ozzy. It was fun. Like, we were sitting there refreshing on the regular, just watching it climb. It's always good to see things like that happen, because it would be very stressful to sit there and you launch it and you get 50%, 60%, and then just to see something stall, like, and just sit there and wait and just hopefully slowly chip away at it. But no, just the fact that you didn't have to suffer through all that waiting for something to fund, I think that was really awesome. I heard something about that. Right. I'm not familiar with that channel. I'll have to check it out. Right on. Yeah, the e-cover is pretty solid. I like that werewolf style monster. Pretty sweet. All right, let's see. I got another sales item I want to talk about. So you guys know me. I am a big EC Comics fan, big Johnny Craig fan specifically. So this is something that recently sold. We'll make it a little bigger. So this week we had the sale for the original cover art to Vault of Horror number 35, and it went for only $183,333. There was some, get you some high res pics of it here. There was a lot of chatter, like, did this thing underperform? Do we expect too much of it? Why did it only sell for that? And the book or the art piece that always comes to mind is this one. The original art for Shock Suspense 6. Great Wally Wood, classic cover. Sold last summer in June for $840,000. Just absolutely stupid. I think it's the most expensive EC art that I'm aware of. There may be somebody out there may be able to correct me on that and let me know if that's not the case. But as far as I'm aware of at the moment, I think that's the top dog for EC original art, which made me wonder, why that one went for so much and this one went for so little. But ultimately what I've come up with is, as much as I love this cover, as great of a cover as this one is, when you think of Johnny Craig, this one may be in your top 5. If you're particularly fond of it, it might make your top 3. But it's not Johnny Craig's number 1 cover, like number 1 EC cover. And I think that's where these two things differentiate, right? When you think of Wally Wood EC, this is the cover I think at top of mind of most people, or for most people, is this Shock 6, because I mean it was put on the right book. It's shocking. You don't expect to see things like this on comic book covers. And I think that's part of the reason why it performed, is just this book is so infamous, really. And Wood does have a good following, which is part of it. But I think the fact that this is the top Wally Wood book for a lot of people, the art and just being so desired in the market, just that cover art is what drives the value of the whole book. I think that's why this piece of art for Shock Suspense overperformed compared to this piece of art for Vault of 435. Now, in today's market, if this was the cover to Crime Suspense 20, Crime Suspense 22, I think we would have been flirting with numbers that are closer to, what that Shock Suspense story sold for. Because let's be honest, as far as EC is concerned right now, there's nothing that's hotter than Crime Suspense 22. So whoever is sitting on that original art, and I laugh. There's a little show in Oklahoma that I go to every year that I absolutely love called OFCON. There's a picture from an OFCON 15 years ago, and I shit you not, the original cover art to Crime Suspense 22 is in a Mylar bag clamped or taped on the wall behind the guy who used to put the show on. And I just about fell over. I'm like, that, any idea what that would be worth right now? And to just see it taped on a wall behind a guy in like a throwback picture somebody had uploaded for this show just blew my mind. But it's fitting. The first actual piece of EC art I ever saw in person was at this show. It was a Graham Ingalls page from Haunt of Fear. But I think that's why this one, quote unquote, only sold for $183,000. It's a great cover. It's definitely a desirable book. And, like I said, I think it's a top tier Johnny Craig book, but it is far from being the Johnny Craig book. So I think that's why we saw it end up here. Which, as I recall, that's pretty comparable to what the Chamber of Chills 19 cover sold for. And I mean, as far as pre-code horror goes, that's very much a top tier book as well. So I don't know. I kind of feel like this Wally Wood cover, for as desirable as it is, like I said, Wood has a really substantial following. It also went up for sale at the right time. Summer 2021 we were all still riding high, things, lots of things still going up, lots of money flowing around in the hobby. So crypto was still doing really well. Baseball cards were still doing really well. You name it, everything was up. So I think this one just had the good fortune of going on the auction block at just the right time, and just kind of everything converged to really help drive it up to that point. So I don't know. That's my thoughts on that. If you think I'm full of crap, let me know. Let's hop back in here in the chat, and then we're going to talk about where I'm going to be next weekend, and where Bobby and Circumstances and MSG, lots of people up in the chat, they're going to be there as well, which I'm looking forward to. I hope not. I mean, I might have made that joke, but hopefully not. Hey, Louise, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. Oh, you picked up number 2? Well, you are ahead of me, because I lucked into a number 3 in a collection I bought. Actually, if you go through my IG, you'll see a picture where I bought like an Eternia last year, and this was actually a follow-up buy from the seller of that. But I'm a lot of what I bought this time was just like associated stuff. So I've got, I think I showed these to Swag last night. I've got a stack of Dino Riders mini comics and some Star Years comics. These are all Motu mini comics. Giant stack of them. So I got tons of the mini comics last couple weeks to go through. And there was actually, I posted a picture of the TMNT mini comic number 3 is the only one I have, actually, believe it or not. And it's in really nice shape. I was pretty happy with that. Just one corner bend on the back cover. No problem, man. It's, it takes a long time for data to travel from here clear out to the West Coast. So it's all good. All right, I think we are caught up on the chat. So I'm going to bring back up next week, of course. I've been kind of talking about it. We're going to be in Kansas City for Planet Comic Con Kansas City. It runs from March 17th to the 19th, which is next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Got a lot of celebrities up in the house. Going to meet Bill Daniels. I've been on a Boy Meets World kick lately for some reason. I completely rewatched all that this year. So I'm excited to get to meet him. Bill Shatner. Actually rode in an elevator with him the last time he was in Kansas City for this show. So that was fun. Lots of celebrities. Got some comic folks here. Steranko, of course. Eastman, Ennis, Roy Thomas, Amanda and Jimmy, Claremont. Some good creators there. But let's talk about exhibitors. So, of course, I'm on this list, but as you go into the hall, you come up the escalators. And me and MSG Comics, we actually share an end cap. So as you come up the escalators here, you just loop around the corner. And we're really easy to find. We're actually like you come up, you kind of make this loop. We are the second and third really dealers, period. This guy right here sells mostly toys, but some comics. And, bam. Couldn't have a better location, really. So really excited to be there. It's the same spot we were in last year. I'm in 1311. He's in 1410. But I know we're going to have lots and lots and lots of stuff. So I'm just looking forward to the show. If you are in the KC area, come on out, check it out. Let's see. Ozzy's asking about the show. The ratio is, I don't know. There seems like there's a bit more toys this year. But typically there's a fair amount of comic book dealers. I did notice this year we don't have anything like what I'd consider a larger regional dealer, like somebody like Dale Roberts. We've had Harley Yee come out in the past, or Graham Cracker out of Chicago. I've seen, the Reese's have set up there before. Just anybody that's kind of more on the national scene. It didn't seem like anybody came through this year, but Planet and C2E2 always kind of fight each other. A lot of people, Kansas City's not necessarily known for being a big money town, as far which is a similar problem that St. Louis has, which is why bigger shows have a hard time there, or seem to have recently. A lot of those dealers will just skip out on this show and just wait it out a couple weeks and go up to C2E2, or Dallas is not too far after that. Oh, Graham Cracker will be there, Tom says. So cool. We'll see AJ hopefully. But it's a good show. Kansas City is a fun town if you like barbecue or steaks or things like that. Plenty of that. But if you're going to be in the area, come by and see us. We'll be hanging out, doing our thing. Usually I'm running around like a chicken with his head cut off. And I look like my head's about to explode, but I'm having fun, whether I look like it or not. Yeah, AJ usually has something pretty good. Just looking through the chat. I think we're good and caught up there. Trying to think. All right. Well, open Q&A. Anybody got any questions? Hit me up, because I'm through my list. I've talked about everything I came prepared to talk about. It's Friday night. It's getting a little late here in the flyover. What am I bringing? Well, I always bring as much wall as I can possibly fit. MSG and I are splitting an end cap, and I have an A-frame wall. So that's an 8-foot A-frame. So he gets half of it, I get half of it, and then we run a 6-foot wall opposite of that. So it's let me do some quick math here. So I have 84 linear feet of wall that I bring to the show, and I shingle my books pretty tight. So there are a couple hundred books on my wall by the time I get done with it. And the sad thing is, like, I shingle as tight as I can, and I bet you I don't put out half of the wall books I actually bring. I'm up to like 6 freaking magazine or slab boxes of wall books at this point. But I appreciate the question, Ozzy, because that actually reminds me of something I did want to talk about. So what I'm going to have at the show, I'm going to have 16 boxes of prices marked, which is just kind of existing inventory, mostly stuff that has been out before, major titles. Typically my prices marked is just stuff that's $6, $6 to $8 or more. Generally, but anything that's going to be below that, you'll find it in a discount box. So 16 boxes of regular prices marked. I'm going to have 4 boxes of new inventory, which is kind of laughable when you think about how much I've actually bought in the last couple of years to only have 4 boxes of new stuff ready. I have failed. Then I'm going to bring a box of Golden Age prices marked and a box of discount Golden Age, which is really more like Golden and Atomic, for the most part, 10-cent cover stuff, for the most part. But it's going to be, discount stuff, probably $3 to $5 a piece on that. And then I also plan on bringing my $3 inventory, which will be, it's 15 or 18 long boxes of stuff that'll go on the floor underneath the tables. And that's all like major titles. So like Captain America, Daredevil, Fantastic Four stuff that is just run filler. All that stuff is alphanumeric in organization, and great if you're looking to put together some runs. So I didn't bring that stuff last year, so I want to bring it this year, especially with my gut telling me that people may be diving into boxes some more. I want to make sure I have some of that stuff. I know Tom will have a bunch of stuff, so it'll be good. Which wall books do I not want to sell? Most wall books I don't want to sell, honestly. In any given day, I mean, I'm happy to sell them when I need to sell some stuff, but it starts the sad process of trying to figure out how you're going to replace them. But I know there's several books that I have that I'm not going to put out at today's prices. I know I have like a X-Men 12 that's slab, that's that price has come down so much, I'll just sit on it. My special Marvel edition 15, that's like an 8.0. I'm not going to put that out. I was hoping something would happen with the hype leading into Guardians of the Galaxy that I could put out my 165 that I've got slabs. It's like a 6.0. It's a pretty nice copy for that black cover. But I don't know. It's taken a beating as well. But I've got a good run of ASM and Silver Age X-Men still. It'll be out. I've picked up a little bit more Fantastic Four, Silver Age Fantastic Four. So I'll have that back out. But we'll have some good stuff and a lot of copper and modern stuff that I picked up out of some of these collections. Lots of stuff that'll be in the boxes. Most of what's in the boxes really is going to be the new stuff is going to be anywhere from $10 to $100 books. There's just so many $20 to $50 books that I've pulled out of this collection, which is awesome. But there's also a lot of, from that same time period, keys, lots of copper and modern keys that, hopefully can make the wall. But I think the thing I'm most excited for is being able to put TMNT 1 through 5 or something on my wall. Just bam, 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 bam. For the first time, I always try and have a 1, but I know I've never had a 2, a 3, or a 4 for sale before. So that's going to be a fun moment for me, being a Turtles nut, just being able to put that on the wall. I've got a Hansi. I'm going to be able to, sorry for the clap. I've got a Hansi I'm going to be able to put back on the wall, which that's a book I always like just for the WTF factor of it. But no, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a good time. My chat just caught up here. Let's see what we got. Wait, we're supposed to read these things? Really? Honestly, I don't remember the last time I read a comic. No, I do. I read Aliens, the origin issue of the Aliens from was it Dark Horse Comics 24 or something like that? I read that when I was bagging and boarding it a few months back. What am I bringing to trade for a whale of a book? I'm debating on sticking this on my wall. So that's a 80-181, if you didn't see it. Trying to get some money tucked away for a TMNT 1 first print if and when one pops up at the right price, which I'm hoping they're still coming down a little bit. I know there was an 8.5 that sold for $16,000 recently, so hopefully that'll put some downward pressure on the 8.0, which is what I'd really like to have. But if I could get an 8.0 between 13 or 14 right now, I think I'd be pretty excited at that. And this is, it's a good point, Swag. And he says excited to hear what trends come out of the show, basically. Punisher books can be hot. That would be fine. I've got multiple copies of Punisher 1 ongoing and mini and Warzone and War Journal, you name it. I got all the Punisher you could ask for, unless you want a 129. I don't have one of those right now, unfortunately. ASM, X-Men, always hot. It's just they have such a broad fan base, such wide appeal. Always something that sells really well on the regular. And I'm actually kind of excited. I've got a fair amount of DC that came out of that 17K collection, which is, kind of stuff I don't always have. Especially like Vertigo era stuff. I've got a good run of Swamp Thing, which I think that'll be pretty popular with the the DC Slate announcement. Everything from Volume 1, Rights and Era stuff, to Saga Swamp Thing when Alan Moore takes over. I've got a really nice run of that, including the 37, that first Constantine. So good stuff there. Excuse me. Valerie, no, I just mentioned that's one I don't have right now. I've got about anything else you could want Punisher wise, but not that one at the moment. Those don't tend to last long when I get them. Honestly, 181's down, but I was looking, the 8.0s and the 8.5s, they haven't fallen that much, really, in my opinion. Like it's enough that I think it's worthwhile putting it out. Um, Especially because that's half of the Turtles one, like that. And I mean, obviously I've got spares. But here's the question: what would you buy if you sold it? Hey, Mildo, yes, we are in the exact same spot as last year. So, you come up the escalators, you make that wide left-hand turn, and there we are. Hopefully the fudge people aren't between us and the crowd this year. That stuff is good. It will definitely stop the flow of traffic. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's some sort of it's like a fudge and candy company out of Pennsylvania or something. They were at C2E2 last year as well, but it's a 30-foot wide booth that's nothing but bricks of fudge, and they cut out like however much you want, and basically you just open your wallet and dump it out on the counter because it's expensive, but it's delicious and great for diabetics, I hear too. A fridge? No. You got to get a cooler. It's fine. Nice. Yeah, I need to. My TMNT run, I decided I wasn't going to mess with the 4th and 5th printings of number 1 because, they're not the original cover. But then I decided it's like I literally have every other printing of every other Mirage TMNT. So it's like, why would I not get those two? That it's just stupid. So naturally, I sold a 5th print for like $10 a few years ago. So that hurts. But those really come back down. I think you can find them under $100 right now, which is great because it was going to kill me to pay $175 or $200 for a 5th print there. First part of last year. I tell you, the book that I'd look at right now, especially if you're a Turtles fan, is Raphael 1. That thing has just nosedived. I remember early 2021, that thing was just to the moon. Yeah, so I was super happy to pick that one up in that collection, so I didn't have to pay stupid prices. Because it's a book I passed it $200 raw. I'm like, I'll find one sometime. And I did. It just took me longer than I thought. But I think yes, fudge. It's very good fudge. It is weird flavors too. I mean, not just your traditional like peanut butter or chocolate or whatever, but they have one called the unicorn poop or something. I think it's got like edible glitter and it's marshmallow flavored. It's one of my go-tos. It's pretty good. Yeah, solid cover. Faux show. But I think I'm going to land the plane on that, everybody. We've been going for about 2 hours and 20 minutes at this point. It is here. It's 11:20 on Friday night. I will step back, let you all enjoy the rest of your evening. Get out there this weekend, hit your LCS, go find some comics. Maybe, I hear you can read one. Maybe crack one open and check it out. I appreciate y'all hanging out with me tonight. Apologies for, no video last week. No video tomorrow. Obviously, I'm here instead of editing a new one. I have just been in grading and bagging and boarding mode, getting ready for the show mode, but it'll be all right. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming here before too long. And as always, I appreciate y'all. Thanks for hanging out with us, and I will see you in the next video.